Chief, you wanna come up?
All right, first of all, on the update, I think all the fire department members should have a round of applause because they all stayed. And we had a medical call that Friday and had 7 people show up for it, along with myself. So I think they're doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
We've made some changes, don't forget, I've only been here a week tonight, so. We added hose to one of the trucks, bought some foam for the trucks. In the process of purchasing 12 radios, so every firefighter will have a radio on the scene. If they go and burn a building, they need to have a radio so we know what's going on. We updated that. Gonna use my run card for now, which is the first alarm is probably 12 to 13, 12 engines, including tankers, coming on the first alarm. And second alarm, some of the other things, change the policy on the turnpike and how we work, because the previous policy, I'm not saying was the former fire chief's fault, but the state police were a pain in the, you know where, at times. They didn't want the road, a lane shut down, and these guys are working in the left ring or the right ring, and trucks going by at 70 miles an hour, and we are now blocking that lane off. If we're in the middle, we're blocking that lane off for the safety of these people, along with myself. I'm a big target too. As they're looking, so that's one of the things we've done. And the other things that we're working on, there's something I'm working on, which Marie's gonna have to contact our administrator. I can't say anymore, but the select board's gotta meet with our select board any night but the 19th, because I get out of being the Berkshire County Fire Chiefs President for the last 2 years that night. So the 19th I'm off, and the other night I'm free. And Billy's been working with the members on training. We're gonna start, now that warm weather's here, we're gonna train more. We actually, Monday night, we're going out and do some water supply, what they were gonna drill with a couple of my officers, and that accident came in, and we ended up being tied up with that. They did do water flow. But the only other question the members had, I don't know what the story was, if they could turn the sirens back on. I don't know if they were turned off with a complaint or what had happened. They said Pete turned the switch off, but I know the tones, I mean, it's not something, that even if you said yes, it's gonna take a while, cause they have to go back to the council up there and put the tones back in, but I don't know what the situation was, and we had to turn ours off, cause we were gonna get sued by somebody making too much noise that had 22 dogs. So you know the rest of the story. I mean, if you wanna look into it, they did ask me if I would ask you if they could have them back on.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a lot of complaints, but Peter was asked, and after a month or two, yeah, there were actually neighbors across the street, yeah. And, after a month or two, they went off, they just disappeared. Yeah.
Even if we could just do it, 8 AM to 5 PM or 8 AM to
Yeah,
8
like
PM,
Lee-
or.
Lee Fire has theirs on from 8 AM to 8 PM. After 8 PM, those sirens do not
I think they
sound.
are loud, but my alarm's not.
Would that work, chief? Something like
I
that?
would have to contact Major Brady, and he would have to get Motorola up there. When they get up there to put it in the council, I believe they can program them into that. You wanna try that, or 8 AM to 8 PM?
Is that good?
That's reasonable.
Yeah, and then I won't wake up burning in the middle of the night.
I'd sleep through it.
What did you say?
Really?
8
Right
AM
across
to
the
8
street?
PM.
Yeah.
8 AM to 8 PM.
It's not gonna be instant, because they have to get Motorola up there to program the tones back in, because you notice your tones changed
Yeah.
when they took the sounds out.
We appreciate it.
I will contact them. There's a few other things. The rescue will be out of service Friday for a little while, because it's got a bad vibration, and we're gonna bring it down, see what's wrong, and put it back into service, and once they get the parts, and we bring it back down. Can't really have it vibrating at 40 miles an hour, 45, but probably a tire ride on it. There's never nothing simple on the fire truck anyways. But That's it, was just working on it. There was one rumor go around that my selectmen were gonna pull me after 30 days. We discussed that tonight, and it's basically left to I feel, or whatever.
So it's not a limit of like 2 months?
No.
Okay.
It's up to me.
Just for full disclosure, the conversation I had with Neil Pilson, who's the chairman of Richmond, he said, it's a great idea, but not forever, because they need you there, so.
Well, I explained to him tonight that Marie's doing a lot of help and the paperwork, and basically, I was bored the last 2 days. Because it really, you know, it's been quiet, but I mean,
Which is a bad word.
yeah, well, I know. It's no worse than what I was doing. I have I have some inspections in town which to do, but other than that, that's no big deal.
Could I ask a couple questions, just to
Yeah.
clarify a couple things for the audience? Why the addition of hose on the trucks, and what kind of hose, and what's the point of that?
It's LDH, it's called, that's a hose that like, we go up your driveway, the first truck in lays in. And I believe on the attack piece, it was what, 600 feet, somewhere in that area?
There was more, it was just pushed towards the front.
Yeah, it wasn't, and we added more than 1,200, 1,300 feet, so when they go up the driveway, they can lay the hose in, then the tanker gets there and immediately hooks to that tank supply with a gated Y and pumps the water up. There was no sense of having the other hose on the other truck, cause that's gonna be going to the water hole.
So
In
this,
fact, the members did that on a Sunday afternoon, nice Sunday afternoon too.
Nice.
So they spent their time down there packing holes, and believe me, that stuff's heavy.
Thank you. I saw, I live across the road.
It was not stacked right when we had the hose tested, which it was tested before. Them guys know how to stack hose, like, they do it so neat, I hate to pull it off the truck. But they are good at it. So that's what we did there.
so that would also be a help to a situation like the fire that we've been discussing tonight, where you need to get to a hydrant location, you'll actually be able to reach it.
Yeah, it'd be within the hydrant, and you can lay in, and the next truck comes in, just lays in from the hydrant to the, you know, where you left off.
Right. And now we're functioning under a full alarm card, so mutual aid will happen faster
I
and
have
more
not made up
comprehensively.
one for the town right now, but my alarm card, I've had every chief in Berkshire County, including all the 4 departments in New York, reach out to me. We'll go to West Stockbridge, or whatever you need. Chief O'Brien and Lennox was another one, they called me, whatever you need, chief, we'll give it to you. Ryan Brown and Lee, same thing, whatever we ask, we'll get. As with the town taking off, I did take West Stockbridge off at a time, and only a short period of time, because once we're pumping water and stuff and everything else, they'll be right back on, because we're too close not to work with each other. But wait, for that time being, we have time to do an alarm card, it's just as easy to do it this way. Even if I did it, the 4 departments from New York would be on it, because you don't wanna strip this area too much. You know, pull everybody out of this area, and then have another fire in Stockbridge or something. And one of the towns will be coming with a ladder truck too. Whether we need it, we can use it, depends on the location, but we'll have a ladder truck sitting there. So, anybody else, anything?
Don't,
What's your opinion of the option we have to review what happened during three different fires? I think that, what's it called?
After action.
it's coming up.
You could, but my opinion is, why, if you're gonna spend whatever you're gonna spend, then give it to the fire department. I mean, you already dismissed Chief Scorpion.
No, we haven't.
And mine would say, if you want to do an after-action report, then you're gonna try to find more, maybe fault with him, or whatever the word is, I mean, he's gone. So why you wasting money on something that, just to prove that something was wrong or wasn't wrong? That's my opinion.
The motion, well, we're gonna talk about that in a minute, we can get into that now, I just wanna ask for but the motion was for administrative leave, and.
Well, if that's the case, then maybe you should, I don't know, that's your call.
We'll talk about that. Karen, go ahead.
Last time, you suggested something that I'd never thought of before, but I'm not a fire chief, you are. You suggested that one of the things you did was you had an agreement and you had somebody come in and inspect all your equipment and your fire engines, and all of that.
That's been done here, they do the pump testing, they do the hose testing, the only difference is they bring the trucks to Lee to have them serviced instead of doing it in the station.
But what you said about doing it the way you said was that then the person who does the inspection has the liability. And if there's a problem with the
That was the
hose,
hose testing, yes, but they do it, they use a different outfit than I do.
but do they have the liability? Does this person who does the inspection have the liability?
They
or
have
do we?
insurance. So if the hose blows, they have it. I believe they use, I don't know the name, I can't remember the name of the company. It's a company out of Averill Park that Chief Scorpio used. And they pump, the people that I used at the present time couldn't pump test was stoppers because they were bigger pumps, but I believe they have the tanks now. I might reach out to them and maybe we'll get a better deal. You come to town for 2 days, you do mine, come down here, and the only thing I like about that is the trucks don't leave the station.
Right, exactly, so
You know,
you're not
it's-
out of
they're
luck.
obviously they're out of service if the oil's
Right.
out of them, but you go to Lee and they're out of service. And they could either do the hose testing down the town yard or even at our department or whatever. But that would be, I'd have to see whether, who was the cheapest. But the liability all falls onto the people, but he does have his hose testing in place, pump testing and everything else. The only difference is I think that one outfit comes in, does an FPA testing, which they check all the lights, but I don't know how they do it down Lee. They probably do it, but I don't know, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
There was mention of the attitude of other towns towards the Richmond Fire Department, and I was wondering if you had any summary of things that should be worked on as a result of that.
But the town's taking them off the run card, I think basically, I don't know, the last fire, we had water issues. So it was basically probably the same thing, I didn't really talk with the other chiefs or see, all I asked, I talked to them and they said they would, whatever we need, they'll give us.
During this whole process, we've had a group of people who continue to show up with a lot of enthusiasm. And on enthusiasm, you can build some great things. But since we're here, I just want to take a moment to just, if you guys want to say anything about where we are or where we're going, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. Okay, good.
No. That's a first.
It's just an FYI, we are fixing your mother's lawn. It was fixed.
Yes.
We've started that.
It's already started to be fixed.
We've already worked on it.
We did do that.
And I did
It's a
talk
live
to
line,
Kurt
but
Bolton
she's the
today, he said
squeaky
work
wheel.
down
Yeah,
in
raise
his
your
yard.
hand.
Not on the
Elizabeth.
hill, but.
Yes.
Liz?
I just wanted to thank also the team that worked at trying to save my house. It's still pretty shocking, so I kind of like don't even feel that it's real sometimes. But I'm also a teacher, and I feel that it's important to look at these 3 fires and the history of how things have been done to make it better. And you can't just, I think, resolve to make it better without having that data and without having that knowledge and understanding how it used to be, as Amanda mentioned, the pinnacle, and I think, Eric, you mentioned it, speaking of how it used to be, and then the struggles that we've had because of funding. Certainly, knowing what needs to be done and what needs to be in place so that the vulnerability isn't there. Because I still feel it every time I drive past my house, and we can't get it torn down yet because there's things, all the red tape you need to do. But it feels awful, and it's a constant reminder that I don't want, like Amanda said, to anything to happen like that. I never even thought about the vulnerability of an old house. But the fact of the matter is that all of our houses are vulnerable if we don't have the equipment we need, if we don't have the training that's necessary and the hoses, and I'm really glad to hear that we're starting that path. But I think in the process of this, it's important to have that data to know what went wrong, what's necessary to make those changes. And it's not about, to me, it's not about pointing a finger at anyone or blaming, but just to honor actually the people that are volunteering their time. To me, that blows me away. It wasn't even, again, something I was even thinking about, that all these people are volunteering their time. I get goosebumps thinking about it. Jen, the way in which you comforted me that night was wonderful. Thank you. So, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. More money. More money, and the information is necessary. It is information that's necessary, and it's not a blaming thing.
Well,
It's
they're
just,
headed in the right direction, because the lieutenant's gonna start taking them out, leaving the firehouse like it's a fire call, have them pack up, come over here in the parking lot, then we're gonna time them, pulling the hose off the truck, and how fast it takes to get water come out of the end of the hose.
Can I just underscore 2 moments in this meeting that demonstrate how difficult it is to sit in this chair? You've got a group of people that understandably say everything was cool. The need for you to make such a drastic change to the fire department is unnecessary. You have a resident whose house burned down and does a little bit of research on his own, or on her own, and realizes that indeed some things really need attention and comes here to demand that something be done. And both things are the consideration of this board. So, I mean, it's wonderful that you only have the power to sway the opinions of stubborn fire chiefs in the region and change their opinion of your department. It's just not the case. This predates me, this whole drama predates me by years. I came into it and I'm a listener, I am not a talker. Dan, you've known me for 20 years. I listen more than I talk. And that's true in this case. She did some research, I wonder if you guys did. I'd love you to. Again, time will tell, but I had a really tough position here to make a long-term decision for the town, for everyone's safety. It's uncomfortable for you because you're members of this thing. And the effects of the change weigh most heavily on all of you, and I know that. And I know it's hard. And again, I'm gonna just say that and shut up because time has to heal this wound, and I hope with time, with working with that.
Dan, you wanna follow up?
You brought the chief in from Richmond in such a way as to make everyone feel like, I mean, you're not coming right out and saying this, but tell me if I'm wrong, you feel like this is an improvement and our houses are much less likely to burn down. But wouldn't it be fairly safe to say that you can't promise that and we
I
can't
can't promise
promise that?
that. The biggest thing is, we did have a house burned down years ago. The homeowner didn't wanna call 911, because when I got there was a garden hose going to the cellar, so we're already in trouble. Don't hesitate. If you even think you smell smoke, call us, we'll come and look at it. We have cameras to check the heat in the house, anything. I'm not saying you hesitated, but I'm just saying, we had that incident in town. I've lost 2 houses. One was dispatch error.
Right, so
Yeah,
that's
give
my
me a
point,
chance.
Eric, is that, you know, don't sell this as, you know, like it's a perfect solution or, you know what I mean, like, just be a little more realistic about it. Things can still happen. Things can still go wrong. We can still do our best and not save a house.
Of course.
I don't get the sense that they quite get that. The townspeople that have been listening to you quite get that.
It's framed a certain way. Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say, Dan, I don't know you guys, but I do observe something very different. You guys are sitting with all of us. The last couple of meetings we had, you guys were back there. I think that speaks loudly.
We were asked to.
No, I think it's good, everybody's smiling and interacting, I think that's a good thing. Want to thank our neighboring chief for helping out. And this issue that came to a head last week, if we want to call it that, has been going on for 10 years. A lot of you guys were never here, and I understand that, and I know it's very hard to go through what you went through. But this has been meeting after meeting for 8 or 10 years. And as hard as it was to be done, I'm sure, something had to happen. And now I think we need to move forward with this. And I want to thank you guys for staying in there and going with everybody. I think if we all worked together 2 meetings ago, I thought we had a very constructive meeting, and we're looking for funding. And I know there's a lot of issues we talked about tonight, but we are gonna have a town meeting, and we are gonna vote on a budget. Is there anybody working on raising their budget?
Yes.
Okay, that's great then. That's a big concern, because that needs to be done. I think, I know it was said that money isn't the answer, but it's certainly gonna help move forward. And the little things that I heard tonight that have been done were very good. I think we just need to keep a positive attitude. I know it's hard not to go back, but I think it's gonna be back and forth for a while, but I think we just gotta keep purging ahead until this works out. And as a citizen for 23 years or so, I do wanna thank all you guys, and I wanna thank you. And the selectmen, it's not an easy job. I've contemplated it myself. And every time I come here and listen, I think maybe I made the right decision by sitting here. But I wanna thank you all for hanging
We're
on
not,
with
we're
this.
not gonna build Rome in a day. I mean,
No,
it
we're
takes
not.
time, no matter how you look
We
at it.
don't
Can I
expect you to.
guarantee another house won't go down?
No, that's good.
All depends on the circumstances.
Right.
Amanda?
I prepared what I wanted to say because I wanted to say some very specific things, but listening to the conversation tonight, I was careful to leave out, Mr. Smolians is correct. I was not aware, that the house fire at my house was going to be discussed last week, or certainly would have been here in the mess of a bazillion other things that you have to do after your house burns down and you lose everything. Like in a very short period of time, I had to do a lot of research, and what I found out, the facts that I found out in that and concrete facts, I sat down with multiple police chiefs that showed up at my house and discussed with them the events of the evening. And I chose to leave some of those details out because, again, I am nothing but grateful for the people that showed up to put out the fire at my house. The picture that Eric showed does nothing for the actual fire that was there and what they walked into. So I am now going to say some of the things that I learned, not because I was hesitant to do that because I don't want any of you to feel attacked or criticized, because my problem is not with you. I naively thought that somewhere across the state that the fire departments would keep some kind of cohesive database of response times, average response times, or even in the county for the volunteer fire departments. And what I learned is just the individual firehouses keep their own records, and they're not really excited about sharing that data.
It's all public. You can get the copy of the run report. That's public knowledge.
Well, I requested that, but they have not yet wanted to give it to me. So, but the point is, I thought, in the beginning thought, this seemed like a very long time, but I don't know. And everybody said to me, well, it's a volunteer fire department, so everybody has to come from their houses to the house to get their equipment and then go to wherever the fire is. And, it was a pretty reasonable time. And I wanted to find out what was a reasonable response time, and it turns out there is no measure for that.
You look at that 10 to 15 minutes, if not longer, but in the middle of the night, by the time they get dressed, get to the station, get the trucks.
So that's according to you. It's a different number for a different station, at a different house at a different time.
Different locations.
So there is no, things being thrown around about response times, there is no place to go and look and find out this is what it should be, or this is what we hope for. There are standards that I have yet to be able to put my hands on, but what I do know is at my fire, they ran out of water. There was a tanker there with water, and they weren't able to attach the hose to continue to put the fire out. That was within the first hour of of the fire. What I do know is that, and I will say, I'm nothing but angry at you. I just, what you did was wrong, and I'm angry, and I will have to get past it. I will say that, Mr. Scorpet, Chief Scorpet, the night of and for multiple times after, reached out to me and said, are you okay? Do you need anything? Is there anything that we can do? And so, like, my being here and my saying things need to be changed is not an attack on Chief Scorpet or the fire department. It is solely based on the information that I got, which was the alarms, and I verified this. The alarms, after the first alarm, the alarms, there are 4 alarms. I don't know how many people know or understand how it works, but depending on how serious the fire is, the first alarm is like a room, and the second alarm is slightly bigger than a room, and the third alarm is a house, and the 4th alarm is oh shit, and the 5th alarm, and the 5th alarm is we're just gonna try and help everything else not burn. And my house was a 4-alarm fire, and the alarms, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th alarms were significantly delayed. And it is the opinion of almost all of the fire chiefs that I spoke to, almost all of them that attended my fire, that at least half of the house could have been saved had the alarms been called sooner, had they had been able to access water. And it is not that I think that everything is going to be fixed overnight, but it is that I think nobody else, it is a long-standing problem in this town. You already did an audit. It is incomprehensible to me that you guys haven't looked at the fires.
I want to pause for 1 second. I want to go back because you said something about it's the opinion of the fire chiefs that, and I don't want everyone to take something as fact. That's what they said. So if there's a review, that'll come back, and I think that's the time to talk about. You just keep talking, but I just wanted to say that because it's not a fact.
Well, I did say opinion.
Yeah,
It
well,
is
yeah,
the
but
opinion, and there's a lot of things
but
that
just,
come
but
in.
what happens is that becomes, the words become something, and that will come back with a review, with facts, but go ahead.
With all of the 10 years or more of problems, it is incomprehensible to me that we even have to discuss that the last 3 fires should be reviewed. It is like Elizabeth said, it is not a want of you did something wrong, because that's not the feeling of it. But how do you know what to fix if you don't know what the problems are?
Then the review would show that, but every chief is different. Some like to call for help, some don't. I'm the other way around. I'd rather have fire trucks lined up to Great Barrington and have them there than not to say, like you said, oh crap, I'll be polite.
I'm not.
And have them coming. It's too late to have them coming. Your alarm and it was my town, I would've had a first alarm, struck a first alarm, which is a ton of vehicles, before I even got my pants on. Then, once I got there, it would've been a second alarm. But then you're talking tankers all the way to Egremont and Sheffield.
Bill, you were gonna comment on something? You all set?
It was just something about the response time.
Okay.
The report, I'm sure the lieutenant can give you the report, cause after something like that, I wasn't here then, but there's 48 hours where you have to enter it in a house fire like that to the fire marshal. You can also get a report from the fire marshal himself.
I have requested.
Yeah, they will give it to you, and we have our copy, which is public knowledge, because myself and several of the members, quite a few of the members, went to a report writing class last night in Great Barrington. And it even opened some of my eyes up, whoops. Whoops, you know? But we can get you the report.
I just think it's too important. I can't get back any of the things that I can't get back any of the things I lost. I can't replace Elizabeth's house, and you just have to wait forward. But again, I sit here saying, it's your house. It could be your house. People don't expect a fire. People don't plan for a fire. I didn't have fire insurance because I wasn't planning for a fire. That's my fault, my failure. but it can, and it does happen. We live in a town with many, many old houses that burn quickly. And it is important to look at what needs to be done to make it better. And I would think that even in the case of the best fire station in the planet, like, you can always look at what needs to be done better. And I really, really encourage that audit so that those things can be changed.
Actually, not to contradict you, but I went to a class with statistics show now the newer houses will burn a flash over 3 times faster than an older house. An older house like that with the Bloom construction, yes, if the fire started in the cellar, it goes right up through. In fact, when I arrived on the scene, it was already through the roof on the back side of the house. But the newer houses go even faster because they're all made of plastic. You got ceilings, you know, people love these ceilings 50 feet high, and air can make a fire really take off.
So what we've got is a good lead-in to the last item on the agenda, which is a discussion and a vote on the after-action review. And so there's 2 ways to look at it. And, you know, one is the chief coming in and looking at everything in the department and doing the best he can to make the department as good as it can be, and you guys following through.
They're doing a fantastic job with what I'm saying right now. I mean, we're not gonna build Walter Rome in a day. You don't invent the wheel in a day, but they're working, they're trying.
But that's good to hear, and I think that should be underscored, as Eric said. They're doing a fantastic job. And then the other is, and it's not mutually exclusive, and it's not going to be. The other is to do the after-action review, which looks at systems and processes, you know, whether it was the previous chief or not, it's his system or not. It's looking at the whole process of each. And anytime you look back, you can find ways to get better. So we as a board need to discuss what we want to do with that. We may want to talk about the price first. Marie, what's the price of it?
6,000, let's see, I'll tell you what it was. So this is his, was 6,800.
So about $7,000.
Yeah, and we do have money in reserve, more than enough money to cover that.
Okay, so
Decide you wanna do it.
pros and cons from our board. You're right there, Scott. Don't?
I believe that while we've been late doing this, it's been part of our respect for Peter in some degree. But we are at this point of an opportunity to do an in-depth, credible review, and I think we should go for it with respect for everything that's good about Peter's corporate, but we need to take this action.
I came in with very different feelings, but considering the distance between this argument and this one, I think an objective review is going to make peace between the two, and so I'm for it.
And Scott, did you have a?
Yeah, I'm thinking of you spending all that money on a review. Just curious, we spent a lot of money on a previous audit. I think it was 12,000. 10,000. Did the board feel that was useful, and do you feel good about how you guys dealt with that audit and addressed it over, I don't know, how many years ago, was it 4 years?
It was probably about 6 years ago.
6 years.
Yeah, maybe even.
Yeah, did you feel that the board kind of followed up on that, and that was very helpful?
I thought it was good, and I thought it was helpful, and I thought the fire department had gone through the items in that report. And
You do think that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And that's, go ahead, Dominic.
I always thought we were kind of always going around in a circle.
Well, what
For a
happens
long
is people
time,
make
meeting
blanket
after meeting
statements.
after meeting,
Yeah.
beating the same dead horse. But you think it was useful,
I think it was useful, yeah.
and you think you acted on it well, as a board? Okay.
Dominic?
So I just had a question, because I'm not sure I understand necessarily, but what's the scope of the review in this specific instance? Does it cover the department? Does it cover that fire that night? Does it cover these 3 fires? Does it cover
So this
some
ties into
political
kind of
pieces
what
of
Scott was
this?
saying. This is it's a different, a total different type of a thing. It talks about specific fires, and I think the chief can talk about
the scope right
this.
here.
The scope of the project would be to provide an after-action review for each of the last 3 structure fires, determine the strengths and weaknesses of the department, and provide recommendations for improvement through measures such as training, standard operating procedures, and equipment upgrades. So it sounds like what it does is it looks at the specific fires and talks about processes, equipment in those fires. Is that right, Chief?
And there would be reviewed, it should be an independent chief that really doesn't know nowhere from the area would be better.
It is.
Yeah.
He's the
Yeah.
retired chief from Springfield.
Yeah, I don't know him, because I know the commissioner, not the chief.
Roger?
Two points, Bernie. To the gentleman's point in the back about the 2016 MRI report, none of the people sitting on the board tonight were on the board when that was written or when it was delivered. So, as an individual, you certainly have the privilege to say you think it was handled well. And I think some arguments could be made that maybe it wasn't. I might be one of the people who would make that argument. And the second point, and it goes to the point that was just made, managing expectations. I did a little reading on after-action reviews, and they're fairly standard protocol for first responders across ambulance, fire service, and even the military. But they're really intended to be inward focused. What did we do right? What do we think we could have done better? How do we benefit from that learning in order to become a better first responder organization? So when I talk about managing expectations, I want people to be certain or to feel comfortable with the fact that this may not have anything to do with absolving anybody or proving a point, because they're not supposed to be about retribution. They're supposed to be about making the organization better. And that should really be, I think that may be what's stated in the objective, but that should be, from my perspective, the only objective, is to make these guys better and not to point any more
And
fingers.
so the question I have is whether we can do that with Chief Traver in-house, like, and Peter says that we do an after-action review. And if we can do that, it's not that we're ignoring anything by not paying someone to do it, but we're doing it with our own people, fire to fire, and not spending that money.
Well, actually, if you do it, all the members and myself should sit down one-on-one and just look at the report. So it's not to criticize anybody, or just to see what, like you said, what we can improve the department. What went wrong?
I really think we need an independent. The one we did in 2016 was done by an independent. And basically, that's 4 years ago. And we've been at, I don't know how many meetings discussing the same issues. I think it should be done by an independent investigation, or whatever you wanna call it, and I don't think it should point to blame to anybody. I think it should be used as a tool to make things better for everybody. But I really do think it should be done from an outside source.
Dan?
Totally object.
I have no horse in this race on this question. I just would like to hear from you, Chief. If the board voted for this and went forward with it, what would you do with the information? Would it be useful to you?
It would be useful, and I would sit down with all you, and we all would look at it together and say, they say what we did wrong, or if we did anything wrong, or what we lacked in, probably how we can improve ourselves.
You think it's worth the money?
I thought it was gonna be more money, to be honest with you. I've never been involved in one, but I believe the previous one was more money. Wasn't it 10,000 or something? It's for the benefit of all of us, really, to see what did go wrong. I mean, I'm second on the scene, and later, the first 5 minutes of a fire, or 10 minutes on the scene, and the most important, we don't knock that fire down with the first load of water. We're in for a long night, you know that. We gotta hit it fast and hard.
Dominic?
You know, I'm just trying to envision, you know, if, you know, we can all learn from it for sure, but, you know, does the chief envision that there's significant information that could be unearthed in this that is otherwise not somehow known at this
It's
point?
not gonna be covered by your, review and your new eyes on the department.
And I'm not saying in any way that it's not, you know, I'm just trying to understand. I can see the value in it, but at the same time, I can also see the beating a dead horse. At a certain point where, you know, it's official, so it costs money, but it may not tell you anything you don't already know. Other than, you know, the formalities of it.
About all we know right now, to be honest with you, is rumors, and once rumors start, forget it. I can start a rumor here, by the time we get to the chief's office down there, it's 5 times worse. That's the trouble. The rumor started that the Pittsfield fire chief was gonna come over and take over for me, and I had talked to him, and he never knew nothing about it. That's the trouble with the rumors. I think we need to actually we're not unearthing, I don't think we're trying to dig up dirt on anybody. We're just gonna, I think it would be improvement for us to find out what went wrong.
How long does that review take?
Do you happen to know, Eric?
I don't, but
You might have
let's
put
see if
it
he
in
wrote
there.
the time.
I'm just asking because
Couple
he's
weeks.
an interim fire chief and at his own behest at this point, so I'm
You're looking
wondering.
at probably a good 2 weeks, because you're gonna review all the call
It
records.
doesn't, he doesn't
Well,
specify, but that sounds.
He interviews all the, people that were there.
I thought it was 2 weeks to even
The
get started.
biggest thing is he's gonna go to the sheriff's department and pull all the tapes of all the calls.
He will, yeah.
Everything's recorded, and they keep it for 20 years.
It will,
So
it
we'll
will
have
take,
all the tapes and we'll
says
have all the.
3 to 4
radio
weeks to
business.
accomplish.
Oh, it does.
Yep, 3 to 4 weeks.
So you will be here in that time, or you?
I'm here for,
The
till you tell me to go
foreseeable
home.
Chief, how much of this could you get done by making phone calls yourself, if you had time?
I'm doing a review.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a while for the tape, but I'd rather really shouldn't be involved because I'm
It's worth asking.
here to protect,
Yeah.
these, well, basically my men. I'm standing behind them.
Hey, Emin, hey.
Well, ladies, you know what I said. I shouldn't really be involved in it, cause then you can come out, well, you were favored this, or you wanted this, or that, or anything else. I think you're better off to have, he's a full-time chief.
Okay, yes, sir.
I do have one good point that might make some sense in the fashion of, not only would it actually benefit from actually not hearsay from one department member, chief here and there, if nobody knows which fire chief it is, and being this one out of, you said, what, Springfield, being the fact that they out of area, out of earsight, completely biased. This way, there's no ear-saying rumors from another person starting something else, stating the fact that all this was said because of, you know, this person, that person, putting earwigs into other ears and making the stability that should be the foundation of a rebirth in this sort of statement, to being a catastrophic break that ends up shattering the entire integrity and maybe even giving worse hopes or false hopes to others in the community. I think an outside person would actually make it more of a strong foundation to rebuild. And we're, I believe, all willing to be on our best footings to actually step forward in a much more brighter future for this town and for all of us.
Well said. So you think a report like that could come back to you and give you even greater information to build a better department?
I think it would make him a better department. By all means.
I'm inclined, we have a tough time spending the money on it, but I'm being persuaded, yes.
I'm for it.
You're for it?
Sure.
Well, we have 2 for it, and so I guess we're gonna do it.
Well, what are you gonna vote?
4. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
I thought it was a beautiful, tough, but beautiful meeting, and shows a good process. So congratulations to everybody.
Does the board have anything else on this stuff? Okay. Chief, thanks. Does anyone, we had some citizen speak time earlier, does anyone have anything that they want to say or share?
I just have a question.
Yeah, you
Because I
have-
wanna understand, because I understand different sizes of hoses. Were hoses purchased? Is
No.
that? So,
No.
did you bring in hoses? What happened that made this different?
We added more hose that we already have
From another truck.
from another truck onto the attack truck.
Oh, so you just moved things?
Basically, the
Shifted
two
things
trucks,
around.
one truck that they have set up for the attack vehicle, and the other truck is made to go to the water.
So
we made the
shifting
attack
hoses
vehicle a little
to
bit
proper
easier.
apparatus?
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
You all set, Mary?
I'm good.
Ready to close?
Yes, please.
I'm gonna make a motion that we close the meeting. Oh, hold on.
Sarah and I came late. I'm Kristen Piasecki.
Hi, Kristen.
I'm
Hello.
Sarah Cullen.
Hi, Sarah.
We were to join these, our neighbors to talk about the speeding on 41 and the incident, so we just.
We
wanted
covered
to-
it pretty thoroughly.
I heard